Good morning. Welcome to today's State Legislative Candidate Forum, sponsored by the Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce and our media partners, KYMN Radio and the Northfield News. I am Todd Bornhauser, President of the Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism, and will be one of today's moderators. Joining me this morning is Terry Knight, News Editor for KYMN Radio, and Chad Yelleming, General Manager of the Northfield News. Timekeepers for today's forum will be Lindsay Reddy out of the Chamber office and Rick Estenson from First National Bank. Thank you. I would now like to introduce each of the 2016 state legislative candidates. First, Mr. David Bly is the DFL State Representative candidate for District 20B. David has been a resident of Northfield for over 50 years. David attended St. Olaf College, receiving a BA in 1974 and an MA in 2004 from the University of St. Mary's. David is a retired school teacher. David first elected in 2006. David has served terms in 2008, 2012, and 2014, and is the current state representative for District 20B. Next, we have Mr. Aramis Wells, the Republican State Representative candidate for District 20B. Aramis is a lifetime resident of Northfield and Dundas for the past 38 years. Mr. Wells currently is employed by Billiken Industry Fabricators. Next, we have Ms. Marla Votes, is the state DFL State Representative candidate for District 58B, serving Dakota County residents of northern Northfield. Marla has been a resident of Farmington for almost 25 years. Ms. Vats is currently employed in the legal department as a lead negotiator for a telecommunications company. Mr. Patrick Garofalo is the Republican State Representative candidate for District 58B, was invited to participate in today's forum but was unable to attend. Patrick is the current state representative for District 58B. Next, we have Mr. Rich Draheim is the Republican candidate for State Senate District 20. Rich has been a resident in Washington Township for the past 20 years. Rich received a BA from Minnesota State University, Mankato. Mr. Draheim currently owns and manages the highly successful Weichert Realtors Community Group of Mankato and the New Ulm Event Center. Next, we have Mr. Kevin Dahl, is the DFL candidate for the State Senate District 20. Kevin has been a resident of Northfield for the past 23 years. Kevin received a BA from the University of Northern Iowa and an MA from the University of St. Mary's, Winona. Mr. Dahl currently is a teacher in the Northfield school system. First elected in 2008 for a 3-year term, Kevin was reelected in 2012 and is the current state senator for District 20. Mr. Matt Little is the DFL's candidate for State Senate 58, was invited to participate in today's forum but was unable to attend. And finally, Mr. Tim Pitcher, the Republican candidate for State Senate 58, was invited to participate in today's forum, but was also unable to attend. The format of today's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for introductions and opening remarks. Then each candidate will receive 90 seconds to respond to each question. Finally, each candidate will receive 2 minutes for wrap-up and closing remarks. The moderators will take turns asking questions. The Chamber staff determine the order for the candidates. Are there any questions? Then let's get started. Mr. Bly, 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for holding the forum today and sponsoring it. It's a pleasure to be here to talk with you and listeners at home. I want to make sure I can see the person holding up the sign so I don't go over my time. As was mentioned, I've lived here most of my life, and I've been a teacher for some 30 years. And as a teacher, I worked mostly with students that might have been described as students at risk who maybe wouldn't have graduated or may have had emotional difficulties. And one of the things I learned in that service was that There are many of our citizens who live in insecure environments, and sometimes that produces a situation where it's very hard for them to succeed. And I think that that's true in our population as a whole, that when we have a economy or a society that leaves holes or leaves areas where there is insecurity, it's much harder for those people to make it. And we need to make sure that our economy and our society provides the kinds of things that reduces that insecurity. Unfortunately, I think our economy in some ways is designed and is moving in a direction where we are even more reliant on insecurity to give us workers or to give us an economy that I think is in trouble. And if we want to make that economy serve people at the local level and really at all levels, we need to make sure that we provide the kind of securities that are going to help people succeed and do better. And so I hope in some of my answers as I give later on, I'll explain that a little bit and also talk a little bit about where those thoughts and ideas might come from. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Again, thank everyone for showing up this morning and for the Chamber for hosting this great event here in Northfield. My name is Aramis Wells, and I'm running for the current seat held by David Bly here. And a little bit about myself. I am married to my wife, Tiana, of 14 years, and we have spent most of our marriage actually over in Dundas. Like Todd said, I was born and raised here in town and in the area, but 2 years ago we packed up and we moved back to the big city, so we're back here in Northfield. I spend a lot of time with a lot of community organizations here in Northfield. I've sat on the board for the Christmas Sharing program here in town, and also Northfield.org, and involved with some other community organizations here in town. I'm also a member of the Northfield Volunteer Fire Department. I've been on that department for coming up on 17 years now. I'm currently the rescue squad captain, and I'm a machinist, just a blue-collar worker here in town. I work for a small family-owned company here in town. Not my family, it's just a small family, locally based, and we make electrical generation parts for all over the United States and the world. So I'm very interested in politics, and my wife and I have been involved in the Republican Party for coming up on probably 6 or 7 years now. And we got involved basically because we want the people out there who run their lives, run their businesses, and whatever else, to be able to make their own decisions rather than the government doing it for them. I believe that most of us are good people and we make good decisions. And I believe that I can go to St. Paul and help have a hand in legislation that will help business owners and farmers and everything else have more of a say in what they do. So again, my name is Aramis Wells. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Votz, 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Well, I want to thank everyone here for coming out so early, and the Chamber for having this. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm Marla Votz, and I'm running for the seat in the House seat in 58B. I'm a widow of 6 years. I have 5 children, all grown. I have been a contract negotiator for about 16 years. In fact, I will go past 17 years now in November. And I have found in doing that kind of work that it's not the kind of thing that you can throw your hands up in the air and say, this can't be done. We can't agree. We can't do something good for this area. That doesn't work in the private sector, and it certainly shouldn't work in government. I want to go to St. Paul, and I want to work through things one at a time, get done what the unfinished business that has been left on the table. I have a normal everyday job too, and I'm not allowed to do that in my job. In fact, I haven't succeeded unless I close the deal. And that's one of the things I want to bring to St. Paul. I've been walking all over my district talking to people, and they really feel unheard. They feel like they have not been listened to. And I'm amazed that with just simply going to people's houses and listening, they're stepping outside their door and they want to talk. They want somebody that will represent them. And that's what I want to be, because I don't think we have that at this point in time. And once my husband passed away and my kids were grown, I turned to public service as something I really wanted to do. I really felt that this area was underrepresented, and I want to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Draheim, 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, and thank the sponsors too. Rich Draheim, running for State Senate for District 20. I'm from Lake Washington, the opposite end of the district, the very southern tip. My kids attend Cleveland School, a little school district located in Cleveland, and more kids go to Cleveland from outside the district than inside the district. A little anomaly. We have a wonderful school down there where the school itself is probably substandard, you know, like most school districts in our district, trying to pass a referendum to update, having a hard time getting the bonding or getting the funding passed. But because we have wonderful teachers and a good staff, small classroom sizes, very successful graduation rates, people want to go to our school. We need to emulate that across the state. We have a crisis in education in the state of Minnesota, with too many districts not graduating enough people. And we need to reevaluate how we do education. And we cannot have what I call a funnel system, where we funnel all the kids through one little funnel and expect them all to turn out the same. So we need to have an adult conversation, not point fingers at one another, and get something done. I spent the first 20 years of my career working for some John Deere dealers. So I worked for half a dozen dealerships throughout southern Minnesota. Pretty familiar with most of the small towns in Minnesota. They're good people. We need representation for rural Minnesota. Most of the district considers themselves rural. We need rural values. And I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you to the Chamber, and thanks for folks coming out this morning, and KYMN, and of course, Northfield News. Appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you today. I'm a teacher. And when anyone asks me what I do for a living, I tell them I'm a teacher first. I've been a civics teacher for the last 32 years, and I enjoy that. I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to serve in the Senate and also to continue to teach. And I've really enjoyed the time that I've had in serving in the Minnesota State Senate. It's a responsibility that I don't take lightly. It's something when I walk into the Capitol that I feel a tremendous responsibility, but also a tremendous sense of honor that people have elected me to serve. I serve on the Education Policy and Finance Committees, and I have since I was elected in 2008. I serve on the Commerce Committee, which, of course, in terms of the Chamber of Commerce, a lot of issues that you might see here in the city of Northfield come before the Commerce Committee. And I also serve on the State and Local Government Committee. And there we see, of course, city, county, and township types of issues. So I hope to remain on those committees as we go forward if I'm reelected again. You know, I have a very difficult district. I have what I would call a very progressive or liberal side of the district, and I have a very conservative side of the district. And so the best bills that I've passed have been bipartisan, that have had, I always have a Republican author either on my own bills or in the House. So I want to continue to work for the people of Senate District 20, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you.
All right, candidates, we are going to get started with the questions, and each question will be asked to each of you. We're going to start with Mr. Wells. On what 3 issues will you introduce legislation in this upcoming session?
That's a great question. I think the real question is, really, do we need that much more legislation? If all of the legislators going up to St. Paul brought at least 3 pieces of legislation with them, it ends up getting to be a pretty busy session. But I do have one issue up my sleeve that I think would be beneficial to the state, and that would be something that has to do with our DUI laws. Right now, with our DUI laws, drinking and driving, it's really the only laws on the books that you can be pulled over and given a DUI, and you don't know that you are actually breaking the law. So what I would like to do is have fees through liquor licensing and DUI fees and whatever else, if you're actually caught, go towards putting a breathalyzer, a voluntary breathalyzer, in on-sale liquor license establishments so that people can actually check their breath alcohol content before they get in their car and drive. Because right now, people don't actually know that they're breaking the law. So I think that's one area where I'd like to make a change.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wells. And there is 90 seconds to answer the questions. Ms. Votz, the question to you.
I have several things that I want to do for my area. The first being getting funding for broadband. Part of my district has no internet at all. That's holding back commerce. It's affecting school children because they can't do their homework at home if they don't have an internet connection. It's also affecting whether people can run a business from that area. And when you think about, a rural area specifically, that's really stifling small business. They don't have a way to connect to the internet. And as we all know, that is becoming a way of commerce and communication that simply we cannot be without. I would also like to work on education funding because we haven't kept up with inflation for about 10 years. Teachers know it. Everyone I talk to that is a teacher has an issue with class size, and honestly what they do with the class size they have is truly amazing. But that's something that we need to do for our teachers, is bring those class sizes down. I have 15 seconds left. I would also like to see public finance of elections, because I want big money and dark money out of elections. It's polluting our political process.
All right, thank you, Ms. Votz. And the question to you, Mr. Draheim, on what 3 issues will you introduce legislation in this upcoming session?
Well, I agree with most what everybody said so far, I guess. But more importantly, not what we do, but how we do it. You talk about rural internet. There's been a lot of money dropped into rural internet. Unfortunately, it didn't go where it was supposed to. It went for some main lines through rural Minnesota to benefit the big cities. So it goes back to how bills are written and who they really benefit. The devil's in the detail. We need to look at the detail. As a small businessman, we don't have the option of failing too many times or making the wrong decision. So transparency, mental health, education, rural internet, all very important issues. But we have to look at how and why we're spending money. We put a fancy title on a bill, have good intentions, but it gets weighted down with pork and special interest groups. We need to clean that up. As far as financing goes for elections, my opponent's campaign, spent over $105,000 more than me. And if you call it dark money or union money or whatever it is, it's unfortunate, but it's still a people business, and the challenge for a poor candidate is to get out there and meet people and interact with people and get them to know you. And I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Draheim. And Mr. Dahl, the question to you.
Sure, and just a comment, of course, my campaign isn't spending that. That's outside money, which I would be glad to see we get rid of. Well, my first priority is going to be education, and, we have a lot of task force up at the Capitol, and the task force have good meaning, but unless someone acts on the task force or working groups, then what's the purpose? So there was a facilities task force that made some recommendations regarding school funding. And there was probably a dozen recommendations that came out a few years ago, and every year I've tried to tackle that list. I think I've taken on about 5 of those already with great success. We are one of those school districts involved in Schools for Equity and Education where, believe it or not, Northfield, New Prague, and Belle Plaine are property poor when it comes to paying for schools. We don't generate the same amount of money in terms of our tax base. And so the school funding mechanism is messed up. And so we need to, one of the things I've done is better debt service equalization. Equalization is a combination of property taxes and, of course, school or state aid. And we need to get that right, especially for rural districts. So I've been proud of the work I've done on facilities funding and will continue to work on that. I will introduce the Renewable Energies First bill, which I've already introduced at the end of the last session. And I would like to continue to work with Representative Bly on intercity passenger rail, so if we can get something down here in Northfield.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dahl. And Mr. Bly.
Thank you. I in a book I've been reading, it talked about some research being done to how to help entrepreneurs or how to make their take less risk. And among the 3 things that entrepreneurs seem to worry about most is access to health care, access to education, and also retirement planning. And a couple of those things I would plan to introduce legislation on, and I've introduced this in the past, and that is a bill to implement a single payer system in our healthcare, which is the only way I think that we're going to really bring down costs in healthcare in an honest way, and also make it sure that everyone has access to affordable healthcare. Right now we're hearing in the news about small business owners and farmers who are finding it difficult because of changes that are happening in our current health system. And I think it's important that we look at that and come up with a solution. Something in education that I've worked on for a long time is recognizing we need multiple measures, not a simple test and not just pen and paper things. Because students have different gifts, and if we're going to encourage them, we need to make sure that we're identifying and recognizing their strengths, and that's what will help them be more successful. The other thing that I've worked on in the past, in North Dakota in 1913, developed something called a public bank, which actually gave security to farmers and small business people to be able to have the assurance that they could get funding to go from one year to the next.
Thank you.
All right, for the second question, we'll start with Ms. Votz. To help Minnesota's economy grow, what strategy or strategies do you recommend for the governor and the legislature to enact in 2017? Certainly. To help Minnesota's economy grow, what strategy or strategies do you recommend for the governor and the legislature to enact in 2017?
Well, I think that our economy is growing. That is a very good thing. Unemployment is low. We need to, the things that are good about Minnesota are the things that we have to continue to do to have a growing area, to have business grow. And that is having an educated workforce, having good schools, having good roads and transportation. Those are the things that are going to cause our areas to grow. Even in the more rural area of my district, those places, like I say, the broadband, that has a business edge to it. That's going to help grow. We have, people that we need to get transportation to businesses. We have a lot of businesses that can't get workers there because they're out in the suburbs and they don't have transportation. So I think doing our basic infrastructure of schools, roads, and and supporting those kinds of things will make our economy grow.
Mr. Drahan?
Thank you. I think the first thing is to have people in St. Paul get their job done. We worked, or they worked hard to get this bonding bill passed, almost passed, and the governor vetoed it. And when you travel across the district and talk to people, especially in the construction industry, my whole district is small jobs. It's small employers, mom and pop shops. And we need a direction, and we need to get something done. Up there in St. Paul, last couple sessions, they haven't done their job, plain and simple. And we need someone up there that's going to get something done, put the party politics aside, quit blaming one another, be adults, and vote for a real bill to get jobs. We need local jobs. We need non-government jobs. You look at most of the jobs that were created, a lot of them are government jobs, some form of government jobs. We cannot sustain all this government growth. We need real jobs. Ag is an important part of our district, important part of our state. In my opinion, it's about a third of our economy. We need to focus on ag, work on ag industries, and part of that is tax relief. And I'm out of time. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dahl, how would you help Minnesota's economy grow? What strategy or strategies would you recommend to enact in 2017?
Well, as Ms. Votz had mentioned, we are on the right track. We are in terms of the nation, we are continuing to grow. We're one of the lowest unemployment rates in the state, but there's always something more that we can do. We need to make sure that we have the workforce for the next 20, 30 years, and we have a workforce shortage, whether it's in teaching, whether it's in the farming sector, whether it's in healthcare, especially as it relates to our seniors. We need to make sure that we have a workforce that will be ready to take on the tremendous growth that we still expect to have. And so, whether it's working to make sure that college is affordable, that student loan debt can be erased, that our technical schools, the pipeline from our high schools is meeting the needs of this next several decades. So workforce development, education, that's very, very important. I agree that we need also to make sure that we have a fair tax structure, and that includes business property taxes. We need to make sure we continue to invest in rural Minnesota, make sure that there are jobs out there for those folks, and we've tried to make those efforts. Workforce housing is very important as well. Broadband, expanding broadband statewide. So I think we're on the right path. There's certainly more we can do, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. Mr. Bly.
Thank you. I think that public investments are very important, and some of what I talked about with making our business environment, our economic environment more secure has to do with that. Providing things that people can't provide for themselves. You can't build a road on your own. You can't necessarily build a school on your own. So you need to have public entities step in and do that. Actually, the comment was made that we've seen an increase in government jobs. Actually, government jobs are on the decrease. We've seen fewer and fewer government jobs. And most of the growth in our economy has been among private jobs. And I think most of our efforts have been trying to make it possible for folks to increase jobs in the private sector. It isn't the only answer, though, because in some respects, if people can't afford to buy the things people are selling or buy the services that they're selling, there isn't going to be a lot of growth, because we talk about how businesses are creating jobs. They do create jobs. However, the demand for the services and the businesses they offer also creates, that demand creates jobs, or the need for jobs. So we need to make sure that people are, in general, are growing and have the ability to see opportunity grow for them, and be able to have more ability to buy things, and have a more ability to make the decisions that they want to make for themselves.
Okay. Mr. Wells?
I think the big thing is to create a great environment for small businesses, making sure that they aren't overtaxed or overregulated, so that they can use free up excess funds for hiring, equipment, and growth. And just making sure that it's easier for entrepreneurs to start up small businesses so that they're not bogged down by government regulation. And I think the other thing, too, is I would ask our governor, how good does it have to get for him to pass things through? I think it's pretty ridiculous when the legislature does get their job done and gets a very, very balanced bill out, and with, 88% support of the legislators, and he still refuses to sign. I think that's an issue. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Great. We'll move to question number 3. Remember, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the following question. Mr. Drahan, we'll start with you. Do you support legislation that would prohibit local governments from setting their own mandates for wages or benefits on businesses?
That's a tough one. I think I'm all for local control. Generally, I'm not for setting wages anywhere. I believe that in a state like ours, where we have this really low unemployment that everybody keeps on talking about, and we need to stop tracking unemployment and start tracking employment. Way too many people that don't work. We have a hard time paying for things, and it's, I get a kick out of sitting up here listening to our sitting representative and their senator. All the taxes that they've voted for raises the cost, and who that hurts are the people on the lower end of the economic structure. And those are the ones, the regressive taxes. We go across the board, and we're taxing everything and anything. So it doesn't matter what we pay them if we don't quit spending money. So we have a spending problem. That's our problem. It's not a tax problem. It's not a revenue problem. It's we're addicted to spending money. We need to get back to the basics. We need to, what does the average Minnesotan want to spend money on? What are their priorities? From what I've heard, walk in the district, education in the classroom, not administration. Roads and bridges, not mass transit. Mass transit's nice and shiny. We can't afford it. And then public safety. And when public safety, I'd throw mental health in there. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. L., let me repeat the question. Do you support legislation that would prohibit local governments from setting their own mandates for wages or benefits on businesses?
Well, that's an interesting question. I generally would prefer that businesses and employees get together and work out their own wage and benefits. I think collective bargaining is the best way and the best approach to try to meet the needs of the employees, but also the employer. I have supported an increase in the minimum wage over the last couple sessions ago, and that was a long time coming, since Minnesota was one of the lowest in the nation in terms of what their minimum wage was. I know that there's some discussion about, especially in Minneapolis-St. Paul, about raising that minimum wage. Also talking about benefits such as paid sick leave or paid leave for family members, which I do support. So in terms of prohibiting it, that's I think there are unique needs in each community, and I think that there should be a robust discussion with making sure that folks are at the table when they're making local policy.
Thank you. Mr. Bly.
Thank you. Well, I believe that government should be investing in things that help us be more successful and help us advance and create opportunity for people. Unfortunately, I think our economy over the last 30, 40 years has developed into an economy where people are pushed to fend for themselves, that you're on your own would be one way to say it. And I think that the part of the problem is that we look at cutting taxes as a way of reducing costs, as was said, when we also are reducing those things that hold us up, that support us, whether it's education or roads and bridges or whatever it might be that we decide that we need. And it makes it more difficult. And where is this push for cutting taxes really coming from? Well, it's coming from big business and corporations that are getting out of paying their taxes. And, you know, the charge was made that we voted for taxing people at every level, and that isn't true. I believe in progressive taxing, and I believe that you should be taxed according to your ability to pay. And unfortunately, when those who could pay more refuse to pay or find loopholes or have the money to influence government so that they get a free ride or they get an easier time of it, it hurts the rest of us. And if we want the things that we've wanted for many, many years, like good education and transportation, regardless of whether it's transit or roads and bridges. And I believe that we ought to be able to invest in both, because I think both benefits all of us. There are people who can't afford cars, and they need that kind of public investment. So just cutting taxes will not get us. In fact, it will make it worse.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, do you support legislation that would prohibit local governments from setting their own mandates for wages or benefits on businesses?
I think America is the great American experiment. It allowed every individual to try their own thing and see what works and what doesn't. And I believe that cities have the right to choose whether or not they want to do that too, but I believe that adding another layer for small businesses and entrepreneurs to have to comply with not only the federal and state, but now also the city, is actually just going to impact the city. If they want to try something where they want to raise their minimum wage or force businesses to give their employees benefits, I believe that they should have the right to be able to do so, but I think it's actually going to hurt the city, where you're going to see migrations of businesses going to other cities where it's easier for them to actually do their business. So I'm in favor of letting them try it. It will actually allow us to see which experiments work and which ones don't, so that other cities don't follow in their mistakes.
Thank you. Ms. Votz, do you support legislation that would prohibit local governments from setting their own mandates for wages or benefits on businesses?
I would not. I get the local control issue, but on the other hand, we do have to keep our industry moving. We have to keep our economy moving. Things like minimum wage. I am very much in support of minimum wage, because wages have been stagnant for over 10 years. People are not getting meaningful raises. The entire workforce needs to get pushed into a higher pay. There's no doubt about that. $7.25 for the number of years that we had it was inadequate. And people on minimum wage are not your job starters. They're not kids. They're not teenagers. Many of them are families, and they're relying on half of that income to feed their families. It's single parents, and those people will be vastly impacted by a minimum wage. So I could not support something that would keep wages low, because that's not good for anybody in the workforce. And a minimum wage pushes everybody else's wages up. And that is something that has to happen, because corporations are not doing that on their own. It's a cost to them, and they don't want to raise wages. So there is a way for the state to do that, and they need to.
Thank you.
Question number 4, we're going to start with Mr. Dahl. How will you assist Northfield and the area with its local transportation needs?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that's always a concern for especially Greater Minnesota. Transportation needs and fixing their local streets and roads. Towns like Montgomery and Lonsdale in my district have a tough time in trying to fix their infrastructure just based on property taxes. So I've supported a strong bonding bill, and I voted for a strong bonding bill several times in the last session. And I think what we need to add is a city streets, municipal street aid for cities under 5,000. I think that would help alleviate some of the burden that's put on property taxes in our cities. I've also been a strong supporter of local government aid over the years, and when we were cutting budgets under the Pawlenty administration, LGA got cut as well, or cities couldn't rely on a steady stream of revenue that they had counted on for years. Local government aid, county aid, township aid, which we've added, has been one way to relieve property tax burdens. So I've also supported corridors of commerce. Many of my cities in my district, like Belle Plaine and Le Sueur, are on, where coalitions have gotten together, and we've seen some real success in the corridors of commerce. I mentioned the intercity passenger rail, which David Bly and I have been working on for years. And so I think a good bonding bill, good investments in our cities, communities, be one way to help our transportation locally.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bly, the question to you.
Yes, thank you. And many of the things that Kevin said I would agree with. I also would mention that both Kevin and I have, on behalf of the communities that we represent, visited with MnDOT when there was an occasion to push for something or say we need to have some action on this particular project or this particular piece of road that needs infrastructure repair. And we've done that, and we will continue to do that to make sure that MnDOT's aware of the needs of this community and other communities. In addition, there's also a fund available to, Kevin mentioned Montgomery and Lonsdale, for smaller cities. And unfortunately, that fund gets depleted, and we need to make sure that there's enough money in there so that they can get the projects addressed that they want to. There are multiple ways that the state can help with making those, and individual representatives like Senator Dahl and myself can have an impact and help local communities move in a direction where they can get those things done. I realize that in the last question I didn't really answer about wages, and we have a very big problem in this country. We've mediated it, I think, mitigated it some, I think, in our own state, but there is tremendous inequality in our country. And as Marla mentioned, we've seen prosperity or progress happening, but those who benefit the most are those at the very top. Something's changed in the way our economy works, where corporations and businesses used to provide more to people, and they're giving less and less to their workers, and they see their workers as costs and not as benefits, and we need to change that. And one of the ways is to have a minimum wage or an increase in minimum wage. I do believe, though, that local entities and businesses need to make many of those decisions on their own.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wells, the question, how will you assist Northfield and the area with its local transportation needs?
Well, luckily here in Northfield, with the exception of this Woodley project going on, we're very fortunate over here. We have many modes of transportation, taxi, eco lines, Northfield lines, and the Hiawatha. We have all sorts of forms of transportation here, and our roads are actually very, very good here in Northfield. But traveling around our district, if you get over to the other side of the freeway, Montgomery, Kilkenny, those areas especially, the roads are very dilapidated, and they really need help. And I believe that roads are an important part of commerce here in Minnesota, and they really need to be at the top of our list of what we need to take care of. They are definitely a need, not a want item like light rail. And I think light rail projects need to be tabled until our roads and bridges are taken care of.
Thank you. Ms. Votz.
Well, I think the local government aid is a big issue for transportation. Really, a public-private partnership needs to happen to really deal with the transportation issues of any given area. We need to talk about bus lines. We need to talk about a way to meet that need, and I don't think that's something that can be done purely by the government or purely by private business, because it has to be accessible to all. That's a very big issue in my district as well, even coming down to Northfield, that we need roads done, we need bridges done, and we need transportation to jobs. That's going to make businesses do better, that's going to make people do better, but there has to be that partnership, because nobody can describe what would be the best option for any given area except for the people in that area. So I think local government aid is a big deal, and really sitting down with legislators and the people of the towns and cities around us to get that partnership going and try and figure out what is the best way to get the transportation to jobs and help businesses and people in the area.
All right, thank you. Mr. Drahan.
Thank you. Our state constitution points out transportation right in it and where some of the funding is supposed to come from. So it is a priority. It's one of the top priorities. You look throughout the district, we have a lot of small businesses. We have a lot of industry. They all truck their products. Farmers truck their products, and they use roads. Light rail is wonderful when you're going to a sporting event or a concert out in the cities. It's great. It's so handy, very convenient, but it's underused. And we can't afford it, plain and simple. We have to you go out and talk to the people throughout the district and see what they want, and it is not on the top of their priority list. We got to get back to the basics. We got to get back to education. We need to get back to roads and bridges, get caught up on that, and then public safety with mental health in there. As far as LGA, the formula is messed up. It favors older, bigger cities, not towns like Kilkenny and Lonsdale and Montgomery. And when you talk to the people over in those cities, they don't have the tax dollars to do bonding or to have an assessment against the people in the town. We're headed to a major disaster in small town Minnesota. Thank you.
All right. Each candidate will again have 90 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Bly. What are your thoughts on the skills gap between skilled workers and the jobs that are currently available and in future years?
Thank you. In some ways, that's a tough question because we don't always know where technology is going to take us. We see changes happening year by year almost in the technology and the demand for different kinds of workers. There used to be, a number of years ago, I think in the 80s, an intervention where there was a combination or a public partnership with private businesses to make sure that our community colleges, our tech colleges, were working with them to help them train and retrain workers. There's still some of that going on, but I think that's an area where not only in those community colleges, but perhaps at the University of Minnesota, a land-grant university that's supposed to be a kind of economic engine for our state, we could do more of that. But it involves making some investment, and maybe through that partnership we could invite businesses who need those workers to contribute as well, and not just taxpayers, but to have that kind of partnership where you could pay for that for those who had the need and wanted to see it happen, and those who could enhance the institution itself to make sure it was flexible enough to meet that need.
Okay. Mr. Wells.
It's a really great question. Little story about my father. He was a computer programmer, went to school in the early 80s, and ended up getting pushed out of his job due to the fact that their company didn't keep up with the changes in programming. And he became kind of an obsolete person in the market. And I believe that we need to do a better job of working with our colleges to kind of bring our employees, even the ones that we're currently employing, up to snuff, so that everyone, even the ones that we're currently employing, stay competitive, so that everyone moves along. And I believe that keeping our colleges in the loop with our employers, it also keeps them current as to what the needs are in the marketplace. So I think working with businesses and the colleges as more of a whole group rather than separate entities is where I would go with that question. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Votz, what are your thoughts on the skills gap between skilled workers and the jobs that are currently available?
Well, I think there's a couple things that need to happen. One, we really need to concentrate on making college affordable. That's a huge issue, and dealing with student debt. If we don't do that, we're going to get less and less people being able to get an education and fill those jobs. We need to work through apprenticeship programs and community colleges We need to know, and we need to make our kids know in all of our high schools all the different options for jobs that there are. My kids are an example of kind of the varied directions that you can go in. And I want those all open, and I want those all taught in school. All those options need to be available, and I think it is very much a private enterprise plus school kind of issue, where they have to tell us the people they need, and we need to make that path available to kids in high school, because otherwise, they're not going to be educated enough to fill the jobs that need to be filled. In addition, we need to have transportation so people can get to jobs once they get hired for them. You can't have a business with no availability of people to travel there to get to that job. So I think all of those things need to be addressed.
Same question for Mr. Draheim.
Thank you. I think it starts in elementary school. It starts in junior high. I've had over 100 employees myself. When I worked for the John Deere dealers, I was responsible for at least that many employees too. And I've seen cycles of rehashed training come through with a fancy new package, verbiage, nomenclature, whatever you want to use. But it comes down to basic problem solving. And you talk to the small business owners across the district, and they'll tell you the same thing. We're in an epidemic already. And statistically, we're going to have a deficit of workers in 8 years. But we have to start training kids to think and to reason in high school. Problem solving, basic problem solving. And I know that might sound strange for some of you, but if you hire some of these kids, they don't know how to do anything. They have no common sense at all. And then we have to look at Minskule and the U of M system and what direction they're going, what their programs are, and if we want to go back to the more vocational type 2-year institutions, which I'm all in favor of, that we did away with, to do a more liberal arts training. I'm all for that. I think we need more regional partnerships with industry and academia. Thank you.
I'll repeat the question for Mr. Dahl. What are your thoughts on the skills gap between skilled workers and the jobs that are currently available and in future years?
Well, I'm very proud of the product that we turn out here at Northfield High School. I think they have tremendous talent, tremendous skills. What we need to do is to make sure that we find the right fit for them. Not every student should go to a 4-year college, and affordability is one issue, but I have seen in the last 3-4 years much more discussion between private businesses and employees and schools in what our needs are going forward. As our population gets older, we have less of a workforce, and we need to make sure that our schools have the right fit. I'm impressed with what Northfield's doing and other schools are doing in terms of talking about career fairs and your options, and we're getting the business folks in our classrooms talking about what could you do with this type of education or this type of discipline. So I'm very optimistic. Again, I also believe, college affordability. We have supported and received tuition freezes over the last few years that I've been in. I think especially our technical schools, college affordability there, student loan, trying to make sure that we have some relief for them in terms of college debt. And again, the pipeline program, which provides training that helps fill workforce shortages in highly skilled areas, something that we passed out of the Higher Ed Committee this last session. So I'm optimistic. There's certainly more work to be done.
Thank you. Remember, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the following question. We'll start with you, Mr. Wells. Do you support streamlining the environmental renew and permitting process in Minnesota? Why or why not?
Anytime you get an opportunity to streamline anything in government, I believe it's definitely worth a look. Just thinking about closing on our house with a couple of realtors here in the room, the amount of paperwork that's involved at the closing table is astronomical. I think our packet was about 1.5 inches thick. like I said, anytime you can streamline it, it engages people and it allows them to want to tackle a project. It allows them to actually want to do something rather than drag their feet and not want to go through the obstacles of all the loopholes and everything that's involved with the paperwork. So yes, I believe we should streamline.
Thank you. Ms. Votz, do you support streamlining the environmental renew and permitting process in Minnesota? Why or why not?
It depends on what streamlining involves. If that is taking away some of our environmental protections, no, I would not support that. I think with a lot of these things that they want to move them very fast because they want to do a project and they see the dollars at the end of the road. The problem is that we only have limited water sources. We only have limited ways that we can abuse our environment where it will not come back to hurt us very badly later on. So when you talk about streamlining, yes, if that's an effective way of protecting our environment as well, then yes. But if you're talking about skipping or shortening it for the bottom dollar, no, that's not okay. And water is going to be one of the biggest issues going forward. And our water supply is precious, and we cannot take it for granted by letting industry do what is economically feasible for them.
Thank you. Mr. Draheim, do you support streamlining the environmental renew and permitting process in Minnesota? Why or why not?
You know, I am in favor of streamlining all aspects of government, but you have to do your due diligence on any. There's all these reviews with mining right now, and if a business wants to come into our state and create jobs, we need non-government jobs, like I've said before, and they abide by all the rules and the laws. Why shouldn't they be able to open a mine? If there's issues with the process, then let's address the process or the laws or the rules. But if they abide by everything that we've set up, why wouldn't we pass or let them come into the state and open a mine? So either we need to address our current rules and laws, or we need to let them open. Plain and simple. It's not fair to cherry pick what projects go forward and what don't. So I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Dahl.
Well, I believe that actually the governor has, in the last few years, done some streamlining. I remember the unsession that we had a couple of years ago, and where we're looking at laws, and it's easy for good intentioned statutes to get piled on to another one and another one and another one. But I think, as Marla mentioned, our water, our earth should come first, our air should come first, and we can't shortcut air and water quality going forward. You know, citizens need to have an opportunity to give input at every step of the way, especially those that are directly affected by something that might be moving into their neighborhood. And so, you know, abolishing a citizen council a few years ago was not the right approach. I think any time that people can give input on things that will affect them directly, environmentally, is really important. If there's excessive layers of regulation that we don't know the reasons why they're there, then I certainly would be okay with some streamlining.
Thank you. Mr. Bly, do you support streamlining the environmental renew and permitting process in Minnesota? Why or why not?
I do and I don't, and I think that we've heard arguments on both sides about why this is a challenging issue. And I think, yes, we do want to have those who want to start a business or have a dream of doing something be able to move forward. But it also makes clear what our system of regulations is about, and it's really about expressing our democracy, making sure that people will not be harmed by their neighbor or by someone else. And so we need to have those kinds of reviews, those kinds of processes where we can assess whether or not there's damage likely to happen. And so we also have to look at history. Mining is mentioned, and the history on mining often is that companies, although they may sign on to remedies for the future, they disappear, or they go bankrupt, or they aren't there to fulfill the requirements. And so we need to have extra care, especially when we're trying to protect our natural resources, which are hard to replenish, hard to make happen again once you've spoiled them or made them bad. And so we do need the regulations. We need to make sure that we protect people, but we need to make sure that we're not really adversely putting harm or hurting those who want to start a business, who want to do something to move forward. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a difficult thing to process through, and we need to make sure that we protect both sides.
Thank you.
Ms. Votz, we'll start with you. How will you work to balance rural and urban interests?
Well, I think separating the two groups and putting people on one side or the other is kind of part of our not very well functioning legislature in the last session. We need to look at both areas. I think that separates us, and I think we need to work towards. I mean, my district is a perfect combination of that, of rural and town. And the things that we need to do for both areas, many of them are the same. We need to work on schools. We need to work on transportation. We need to work on broadband. We need to do those things for both sides of the district. It really doesn't differentiate them in those reasons. But talking to farmers, sitting down and talking to farmers, that is what gives you the best idea of what needs to be done in a rural area. As far as the regular town part of it, or the cities part of it, those things are all best addressed by the areas that they're in, and so there's always going to be both areas in the legislature. We all need to work together to act like a community, like both of those areas are part of us.
All right, thank you. Mr. Draheim, how will you work to balance rural and urban interests?
They're intertwined. I mean, you look at our economy here in Minnesota. Ag is so important. Agriculture, construction, transportation are all big industries in our district. The processing, the ethanol, they're to me, job growth is one of our top priorities as a state. And, if you reevaluate how we do things as a state and prioritize what we're focused on, I think you can have a good balance between the two of them. And my district is primarily rural. And, transportation to and from, education, they should balance out. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl.
Well, I've been part of a rural caucus of the 7 years that I've been in office. We meet every Tuesday morning at the legislature, about 25 of us, and we talk about those issues that are important to rural Minnesota. I consider myself a rural legislature. Some of my best legislation has been helping landowners or farmers out in Senate District 20. The Buy the Farm legislation that Representative Bly and I passed, taking on XL Energy, probably my most satisfying piece of legislation that I ever passed, by skirting around the committees on the last day to get that passed for some landowners out in Scott County. Forever Green initiative that David and I have passed and funded for the last 3 years. the Young Intern Farmer program that I introduced with the help of some Carleton students. So I consider myself a rural district. We certainly want to make sure that, and I'm very tired of any fighting that goes on between greater Minnesota and the urban districts. We certainly need each other. The economic driver for Minnesota is of course, the metro area, and much of the tax dollars that we get as a state comes from the metro area, but needs to be dispersed equitably throughout the state. Also, in terms of education, making sure that our rural districts get the same type of funding that the metro districts get. So those are issues that I've been working on. I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Mr. Bly?
Thank you. Yes, and I agree with much of what's been said, and I think Marla hit the nail on the head when she said it adds to the polarization that we see in the legislature now when we divide our state, when we aren't thinking about the interests that go across borders. One of the things that I try to do as a representative is to notice what things do we share in inner city and rural areas that are problems that we could solve by getting together and trying to solve them together. We really are a diverse but one economy, and we benefit from growth and the strength of our economy in both the rural and urban areas. So all the things that we can do to make sure that we erase the differences and capitalize on the strengths and the unity that should be there. So there's been some talk about transit, for instance. Transit is kind of easier to see applications in the inner city, but it's just as important in many rural areas. And if we didn't have bus service here in Northfield like we do, there are many people who wouldn't be able to get around town, wouldn't be able to go shopping, and wouldn't have the advantages that they need. And I've had folks, business owners in town here, who say, I can't get the employees I need. And if we had a train that brought passengers in and out of town, they could come from greater distances and work here in Northfield, and I would get the kind of labor that I need that I don't have right now. And so I think there are many ways in which we share concerns and interests and challenges, and need to work on those.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, how would you balance urban and rural?
Well, I believe they all have their own distinct issues, but what it all boils down to is needs and wants, like I said earlier. And I think no one's arguing the fact that if Bemidji needs a water treatment plant somewhere up there and they need funding from the state, no one's going to hold that from them. Clean water is a priority. And likewise, if Burnsville needs additional lanes added to 35 to get over the freeway or to get over the river because it bottlenecks every morning, that's a priority. It needs to be taken care of. But I think where the rural and urban really get pitted against each other is when they start throwing their wants into bills because they feel that they're needs. And I like to bring light rail up always as an example, mostly because light rail is looked at by some of these communities as a need, so it gets put on the state docket for the entire state to pay for, when I really believe that those local communities should be the ones paying for it, because it's not benefiting the other parts of the state. And as seen with this last session, when Southwest Light Rail was denied, that they actually could come up with the funds locally, and it is a want issue. And I think we really need to just get back to the wants and needs, put just the needs in the legislature, and everything will sail through without a problem.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on with Mr. Draheim. We'll answer this question first. Each candidate will have 90 seconds. Small businesses are today's job creators. What is the legislature's role in job creation?
Leave us alone. It's about the whole environment from a state. We've talked about good employees. We've talked about transportation to and from jobs. I find it ironic that we talk about a rail line coming to Northfield to bring workers here when we have all this mass transit in the Twin Cities, and the Twin Stadium had to bus workers in from out of state when we have plenty of people able to work in the state. But because of how much welfare we pay out, it's more profitable for them to sit at home on their couch than it is to get to work. So we need a little tough love across the state, and to get people back working. More workers, better we'll all be. We'll have less tax burden, more people working. Hopefully, crime will go down. A whole bunch of statistics that prove it's better for society, more people working than not working. But government should assist small businesses work. And I find through my experience that a lot of government agencies are the stop police, don't do anything, and try to hinder small business more than assist them solve a problem. And I'm out of time, but thank you.
Mr. Dahl, same question.
Well, I was disappointed also that the governor vetoed this last tax bill, because there was some good bipartisan support in terms of giving some business owners some relief. There was a $140 billion investment in reducing the statewide business property tax, which exempted the first $100,000 of the commercial industrial property tax for business owners. That's a good start, and I think we should continue. As we have a surplus, we can actually look at good tax policy. Also, some other things that we've done. The June accelerated sales tax reduction helps over 5,000 businesses by eliminating that. The upfront sales tax exemption for capital equipment, expanded tax credits like the angel investment tax credit, which was, I remember, introduced by Kathy Salzman, a Democrat, back in 2010. We also keep working at reducing property taxes for businesses and people. I think all of those can be some things that can move us going forward. We've talked about workforce development. I think that's also important. But I think we should continue to look at taxes in general and how they affect businesses, so we can continue to attract good businesses in Minnesota and keep our economy growing.
All right, I'll reread the question from Mr. Bly. Small businesses are today's job creators. What is the legislature's role in job creation?
I don't disagree that small businesses create jobs, but I don't think that they're necessarily the only avenue for doing that. I think it's great when an entrepreneur comes forward with an idea and creates a business and moves forward. And there are many challenges, and I hope that we can reduce those challenges. But all that costs money. Even the tax breaks cost money. And if we are cutting taxes across the board and trying to help everyone and boost them up, we're going to run into trouble. We're not going to have enough revenue in order to do all of those things, plus repair bridges and roads and have schools. So I think we need to be strategic about how we're doing that. A problem that we face as well is that we have in our economy nationally, not just in Minnesota, but allowed large businesses and corporations to kind of take over the businesses and services in many small communities. And what happens with that is that the money that would be here gets funneled out into places like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco, rather than staying here in Minnesota and staying in local communities. And yet we still think that we should cut their taxes so that they can create more jobs. But and actually what happens is they reduce jobs. And so we need to figure out, how do we invest, how do we get the revenue we need to provide the services and the support to small businesses so that they can create jobs, and that we can be assured that if we give them help that they will actually create jobs too. That's important as well.
Mr. Wells?
I agree with Rich's statement. I believe the government's role for creating small business help is to really get out of the way. For the small company that I work for, who only employs 6 or 7 people, the amount of time, energy, and cost that goes into complying with regulation could be put to better use by either hiring additional help, purchasing newer, more advanced equipment, or paying the workers that they have more money. And I believe it's just getting some of the regulations off of the small businesses' backs so that they can get to the business of actually running their business. Regulations is a big one for me.
All right, same question, Ms. Votz.
Well, we're all job creators. Everybody in this room is a job creator. What makes a good economy is where there are jobs, where people can buy things, because there there is no economy without people having the ability to purchase things. That makes us partner with business, and that is a good thing. Partnering with business, legislature can support those businesses by having good schools, by having well-educated people, with apprenticeship programs, accessible education, having our homegrown training in place for those businesses, having transportation systems that can get workers to those businesses. If you can't buy anything, you can't support your local economy. So having jobs and reasonable wages is what's going to push our economy forward more and more. We always have to look at whether the business things that we are doing are for large business or are for small businesses. We do have to help our small businesses, but what we can really do is have an infrastructure ready to fill jobs for businesses, because that's the real economy.
Thank you.
All right, remember each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the following question, and we'll start with you, Mr. Dahl. Do you support increasing the gas tax or other taxes to increase funding for transportation or use general budget appropriations?
Well, I have voted for a gas tax. Matter of fact, in 2008, I was one of the in the Senate and the House as well. We overrode Governor Pawlenty on a 6 3/4 cent gas tax. And when we did that, gas was $3.09 a gallon. We have about a $600 million a year problem in terms of just maintaining the roads, bridges, and infrastructure that we have right now. And I don't believe that $900 million surplus that we had last time is going to continue. $600 million of that was one-time savings from the federal government in terms of Medicare reimbursement. And so that's not sustainable. And so I'm okay with a nickel gas tax. Maybe it has to be a dime, especially since we've seen gas prices, over $3.50, the last 6 or 7 years. That's the only way that we can get to the issue of not only maintaining what we have, but also building out our whole transportation system. So the surplus is not going to remain. It's not sustainable. We need $11 billion before 2020 to try to keep up, and that'll help our economy and so forth. Plus, when you start rating the general fund, less money for schools, less money for nursing homes and seniors, and less money for cities and local government aid. So new revenue is necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Bly, same question.
I agree with almost all of what Kevin was saying, that we can't depend on existing funding to cover the great need that's out there. And of course, if we let the roads and bridges go unrepaired because we can't afford to do all of them, it gets more expensive. It doesn't get cheaper, it gets more expensive to do it. And so we'll need even more revenue going into this. I just want to make clear, too, that the gas tax does not at all fund transit or trains or whatever. That has to come from general fund money or from bonding. It doesn't come from the gas tax. So we're going to be taking care just of our basic roads and bridges needs if we increase the gas tax, and it can only go there, can't go anywhere else. I wanted to speak to one thing that was said earlier, though, about welfare recipients. And our welfare system was reformed so that there are not people sitting around just collecting a check anymore. That's not the way it works. And to imply that people that twins bust in people because people wouldn't get off their couches to get a job is just a lie. It's not true at all. And I think the twins made the decision because they made contracts with people who could provide workers from elsewhere. It had nothing to do with trying to hire people here. I think it's disgraceful to imply that we have people in Minnesota who want jobs, who would take jobs if they were offered, are not willing to work.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, do you support increasing the gas tax or other taxes to increase funding for transportation or use general budget appropriations?
So I'm kind of an anomaly. I'm one guy on this side of the aisle, if you were going to split parties, that would actually be in favor of a gas tax, because I am for any kind of a tax that is a fair system. I believe right now that with license tab fees, basically what that is just an overreach of the rich or someone that has a nicer car. I would be in favor of a gas tax increase if and only if we were to make license tab fees a flat fee that everyone could afford. If someone has to pay $700-800 a year for license tab fees, I think that's ridiculous. I think what's really happening is we need a consumption tax where the people that are pounding more miles on their cars and beating up our roads should be paying more to fix them. So I'm in favor of a gas tax, but if and only if we make license tab fees a flat tax.
Thank you. Ms. Votz, same question.
I would also be for a gas tax because we have to have a long-term plan. This is one area where you just cannot throw a patch at it with a little bit of money. We have gotten so far behind that we need to spend so much money just to get things back up to par. And we as Minnesotans know that political discussions do not stop bridges from falling. They do not stop highways from being, undrivable. This is just one of those things that has to be addressed. And if we want to put a long-term plan in and not have this come up every single legislature session, then we need to put a plan in place. And that will provide us sustainable funding into the future and keep these in working order. So I believe we have to do that. It's our duty as citizens to take care of this.
Thank you. Mr. Draheim, do you support increasing the gas tax or other taxes to increase funding for transportation or use general budget appropriations?
A couple things on that. First, to respond to Mr. Bly's comment about unemployment, maybe you should get out of your government bubble a little bit and talk to some employers, people that actually hire people, and what people that are on aid say to you when they come to apply for a job, or they quit because they can make more money on unemployment than they can working for you. But on transportation, I know Senator Dahl voted for the 16 cent a gallon gas tax increase. It goes back to budget and priority. I think it's kind of funny we talk about priorities, and yet we still want to do light rail. Light rail is like $125 million a mile, and roads are what, $5 million a mile. Do the math. If you really want to fix roads and bridges, put light rail on hold. Focus on getting caught up, and the Republicans are part of the problem. Why we're behind. I no problem blaming us too. We're part of the problem, but it's priorities. But a little frustrating for me when I see and hear of that new bridge going over the St. Croix. They've been working on it for 20 years. Wonderful looking bridge. I don't know if you guys have seen pictures of it. They want to spend $1.7 million hiring a PR firm to promote the opening of the bridge. That's the stuff that drives me nuts. And I'm being told to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, candidates, Mr. Bly, I'll start with you. What is your position on Minnesota business taxes, and what recommendation and or change would you support to help the business community?
This has come up in discussion a little bit before. I did carry a bill along with Senator Dahl for business owners in Northfield, trying to look at the differences between needs they have for restoration, or if you have an older building, there's more difficulty in kind of meeting the same, and yet you're charged the same property tax as someone in a newer building. And is there something we can do to help with that? And I think that's a good idea. I think it would be good if we could kind of even the playing field for those businesses. I think in general, I as I said before, I support progressive taxation and not regressive taxation. And sometimes property taxes can become regressive, and we need to make sure that we're cognizant of that and look at that as an issue. Historically, property taxes, when we've looked at those, we've said, well, businesses are able to generate money, so they can have either a higher tax, or it's more logical for them to pay property tax. That isn't always true, and sometimes it can become a drag on a small business. I think we need to look, again, as I said before, the difference between large corporations and who have vast funds and ability to pay more taxes than small businesses. And so we have to balance all of those things out.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wells, the question for you.
Well, anytime you can lighten the tax load of any business, they can use that money in turn to reinvest into the business, hire employees, like I said, purchase equipment, and whatever else. So anything that we can do to lighten their tax load, I think, is something that we need to look at. I like to look at businesses through the lens of that businesses aren't there to pay taxes. Businesses are actually there to collect taxes. And I think if we kind of get our heads wrapped around that idea that businesses actually collect taxes from other people, and they really shouldn't be pouring all of their resources into paying their own taxes. So lightening the load for small businesses and making it easier for them to get by and to invest into their company.
All right, thank you. I'll read the question again. Ms. Votz, what is your position on Minnesota business taxes, and what recommendation and or change would you support to help the business community?
Well, I think what David said is really really something that I would want to discuss and work on legislation for, and that is evening the tax code for small businesses and large businesses. My experience with large corporations is that any money that they save on anything doesn't really go towards the business. It certainly doesn't go towards wages. So that has to be taken into consideration. We also have to really know that we have been, as a state, talked about as one of the best states to do business in. We are growing, and there's not a whole lot that I want to change that because we are growing. We're doing well. Again, we have to concentrate on the very basic things that make businesses do well, and that is educated workforce. It's a school system that is good, so we have educated kids. Businesses are coming here. They're not leaving here. They're coming here because we are a good state to do business in, and because we put our money into our infrastructure and educational system. That's important to business as much as taxes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Drahan.
Well, I'd have to disagree with almost everything she said. Businesses are leaving. You just got to read the paper, okay? I mean, Lockheed Martin, Hartford Insurance, there's a whole bunch of companies that have left Minnesota because of the tax structure. And I'm not for cutting taxes across the board. We just need to take a time out. We don't need to constantly try to create new revenue for the state. We need to prioritize how we're spending money. There's almost every publication when you read about how Minnesota fits in. Wonderful state. I love Minnesota. Lifelong resident. I'm not moving, etc. So I'm not against Minnesota. But we are heavily taxed. Most people rate us third to fifth highest taxed state in the nation, which has worked out for us overall. But now we're running out of workers. People come here to do business because we had a great workforce. Well, what have we heard? We've heard that we don't have enough workers. So if we don't have enough workers and they're not trained, why would you come here and pay such high property taxes, high sales tax? I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dahl.
Well, yes, I did address the statewide business property tax, and if we eliminated it totally, we would have a $1 billion shortfall in the budget. But again, we did take a stab at that and $140 million relief, especially in the first $100,000 of commercial industrial property tax we have eliminated. And it's been 15 years since this has been put in place. And the property tax structure overall, because of pressures on either local government or schools, has caused us we need to relook at the statewide business property tax. And if we continue to have a surplus, then I would agree that there's one area that we can maybe make some changes. In terms of the corporate tax rate, it looks high at 9.8%, but with all our unique tax credits, deductions, and other incentives, we're actually at about 3 to 5%, which is actually average compared to other states. So Minnesota is a great place to do business. Corporations are coming here. In terms of the number of Fortune 500 companies that this state has, compared to even our surrounding states, it's great, and we're continuing to grow, and we'll continue to do well. But I'm certainly willing to look at the overall tax structure, and good tax reform can come into play as long as we have a budget that can allow that to happen.
Thank you.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Wells, 90 seconds for this question as well. If elected or re-elected, will you commit to elect new leadership to lead you in the House or Senate, different than the leadership of the past 2 years?
I would actually push for a change in leadership in the House. I believe that change is good and it gives a fresh look at things. I also believe that the power of the caucus is really kind of pitted left against right, and it really gets bottlenecks a lot of things. A lot of the process is held up because of the fact that Republicans are against the Democrats and whatever else. I believe that the power of the caucus has really kind of gotten out of hand, and we really need to work more as one unit rather than separate entities. So I would be in favor of changing our leadership.
Ms. Watts?
It's difficult to say for me what the leadership should be. But I can say that we ended in gridlock this last session. So something has to change. I'm not sure if I would change our leadership, but I would really want to know that their approach would be to work together and to get things done. That's the most important thing. It's not so much the leadership, it's the approach to leadership that I would be looking at, because we cannot end another session in gridlock. We cannot wait till the last minute. We cannot put all of the important issues on the last week of the legislative session. That should not happen. That's a time management issue, and I think that has to be addressed with whoever is the leader of either party.
Thank you. I'll reread the question. If elected or re-elected, will you commit to elect new leadership to lead you in the House or Senate, different than leadership of the past 2 years? Mr. Draheim.
Well, I hope so, because if I get to vote on it, that means the Republicans took over the Senate. So, you know, I agree with what's been said up here. We need people in St. Paul that want to work for the district and take their jobs with fiduciary responsibility. And if elected, my responsibility is for the district and for the people of the district, not for a party, not for whoever got me elected, wherever all that dark money came from, special interest groups. We need to represent the people and what's best for the district and the whole district. So, you know, as far as leadership goes, we need people in there that are going to sit down, be able to look across the table at the other side and have an adult conversation. And I haven't seen an adult conversation in St. Paul in years. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl.
Well, the leadership currently, we have the governor, we have Senator Tom Bach and Representative Kurt Doudt. And you're right. They have a little too much power in terms of negotiating, especially last-minute deals. You know, we've had the Come to Jesus meeting with Senator Bach in the last year, and I think he has improved in terms of communication, but I still think we can go further. I'd be interested to see who steps up to want to take on the majority leadership of the Senate, and I would hope that they would take on some of the reforms that I've asked for in terms of part of the Purple Caucus, that earlier deadlines, a fourth deadline, which means that conference committee reports don't come out on the last day of the session, that we all have a chance to weigh in on what that conference committee report, and breaking up those large omnibus budget bills into smaller pieces where we're not surprised by something that's in there at the last minute. So I would hope that the next leader of the Senate is someone that would take the reforms that I've recommended, along with my Republican and Democratic colleagues, that they could go forward and say, this is how the House and Senate should run. This is what the people of Senate District and Minnesota demand. And if you can't do that, I can't vote for you.
Same question for you, Mr. Bly.
Well, it's not that I disagree with things that have been said. I think people are expressing an idealism that government should work, and we want it to work. We want people to work together. It's not necessarily new with the leadership that we have right now that you have outside influences trying to pressure or push leadership in a certain way. I've seen it in the years that I've served that's happened. In my experience in my own caucus is that I think the leadership in my caucus has really tried to let individual legislators go the way that they'd like to go and to vote the way they want to vote on issues. I haven't felt the same kind of pressure that I've seen applied in the other caucus. I'm worried, though, and I think we see this nationally, that more and more people are feeling that they are not represented by their government. And I think that has a lot to do with the influence of money in our politics and how it's changed the way things work. I hope that for looking at what happened with the Bernie Sanders excitement, and even with Donald Trump, people saying, I feel underrepresented, I want change, I want someone from the outside who's going to do things differently. It's an important message for us as politicians to listen to and hear and make sure that we are listening to people and we are trying to push for their interests. And I think that the influence that has been there has been that dark money, those corporations that push us in a direction that doesn't necessarily help local people, doesn't help individuals. We need to figure out how to listen and talk to them.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip my question and turn it over to Terry.
All right, thank you. Mr. Draheim, healthcare costs continue to grow at double-digit rates every year for individuals, businesses, and government. Has Obamacare and MNsure been successful? What policy changes would you recommend to help manage these increases?
MNsure, when I started running, to be real frank with you guys, I was concerned about health care, but I had no idea how bad it was throughout the district. Because most of the district has small businesses, mom and pop shops, we don't have large corporations like the Metro has that employ a lot of people. We have a few, Post here in town, and Cambria, and Le Sueur Incorporated, and some others that employ a lot of people. But outside the government bubble and education bubble, there isn't a lot of large employers in our district. So it's a little different than a lot of places. We have a lot of people that are struggling to make ends meet because of healthcare costs. And we talk about how to pay for it, but we don't talk about why it costs so much. So we need to address why the costs are so high, why we're in MNsure to begin with. In 1975, 8% of GDP was spent on health care. It was a crisis. Last year, it was 17.5% of GDP was health care. Minnesota Department of Health predicts over the next 6 years, every year, costs are going to go up 7 to 8% every year. We got huge, major problems, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Mr. Dahl, would you like me to repeat the question?
If you would, please.
Healthcare costs continue to grow at double-digit rates every year for individuals, businesses, and government. Has Obamacare and MNsure been successful? What policy changes would you recommend to help manage these increases?
Well, you know, we do need to make some fixes. You know, the Affordable Care Act has some good things in it. You can't be denied health coverage for pre-existing conditions, allowing your children up to age 26 to stay on that. And we have more people insured now than at any time in history of this country. But, you know, we do need to make some fixes there. MNsure is just the platform. It's an exchange. It shouldn't be blamed for the rising cost of health care. You know, in 2010, when the Affordable Care Act came out, states had to choose whether to go on a national exchange or to create a state exchange. The Republicans were in charge for 2 years, and they did neither. I've never really seen what my opponent's plan is to try to get control of costs. And so we had to come in January when the Democrats took over, and we had basically 2 or 3 months to try to come up with the exchange and what it was. So it has some glitches. But the real drivers are the costs of health care, prescription drug costs. We certainly need to do more. I think we should allow more Minnesotans to purchase MNcare coverage. That's Minnesota Care. I think we should provide an alternative open enrollment for the individual market, and we should continue to work on the glitches that we see in MNsure. I prefer a single payer plan, and I would actually rather see us get off of the current delivery of health care as we know it today.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bly, the question to you.
Yeah. So if we look at how other industrialized countries deal with this question, they have systems either like single payer or a nationalized health system like they have in England. They have far less cost than we do, and they're able to control their costs, and we can't. And we've relied on a market system that of insurance that actually increases risk for many people and increases costs. And that's what we're seeing. And Obamacare was an effort to try to bring some regulation, bring some something to bear against that free market and the insurance companies to have them serve the people that they sell insurance to. It hasn't really worked as I see it, which is why I intend to introduce a bill to have a single payer plan, the Minnesota Health Plan in Minnesota. I will have to see whether or not people get behind that or not, but I think it would provide a more fair, a system that would allow us the ability to control costs and actually be, I think, a magnet for business. I think businesses would want to come here to take advantage of the kind of health system that would be more fair, more cost controlled, and help people. So what we need, you know, the first insurance company came in this country down in Dallas, Texas, to help a hospital be more secure, to come in and to reduce risk to people who might need to use that hospital. We need to get back to that sense of reducing risk for individuals.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bly. Mr. Wells, I'll repeat the question for you.
Great, thank you.
Healthcare costs continue to grow at double-digit rates every year for individuals, businesses, and government. Has Obamacare and MNsure been successful? What policy changes would you recommend to help manage these increases?
I don't believe either MNsure or Obamacare has been successful, and I really believe that MNsure, especially on its own, has just recreated the wheel and has been a debacle from day one. I believe that we should repeal MNsure and go on to this federal exchange, because right now that's the law. We have to abide by Obamacare, and stop the bleeding. Right now we're putting so much money and resources into something that isn't working for our state. So getting rid of that is a priority. And David said that, you know, Obamacare was there for regulating free market and whatever else, but I don't believe the free market actually gets a chance to work properly if it's so heavily regulated. In order for free market to work, it has to be an open process, and I would much rather see a process where people can choose what their insurance is, who their company is, what kind of coverage they want, whether or not they want to have it or not, and be able to get medical care actually more like your veterinary care than your doctor. Be able to shop around and actually go and have a list and see what your what you need done and actually see what your cost is going to be at different clinics so that you know ahead of time what your actual cost is going to be up front. So I think giving a chance for the free market to actually work and stopping the bleeding with MNsure.
All right, thank you. Ms. Votz.
When you talk about Obamacare, that has a very personal story for me. My husband had cancer for 8 years. If the laws had not got into effect when they did, our family could have been bankrupt very quickly. His insurance or his medical costs just for one medication were $8,000 a month. So therein lies the problem. Obamacare fixed a lot of those things, thank God, because I would not be in the place I am. I may not have my house if that had not been put into law. What I think we need is transparency. We need transparency, and I would agree with Aramis, we need transparency in cost. I just saw, I don't know if it was on the TV or it was an article about trying to find out how much it would cost for somebody to have a baby at a hospital, and they couldn't find out. That's the kind of thing we need to change, because if we want to bring the cost down, people need to shop around and have an honest bottom dollar that they would be paying. But honestly, taking Obamacare away, or even MNsure, I don't think we would gain a lot. We're still under the same set of laws of Obamacare. So that would not change whether it's a Minnesota exchange or a federal exchange.
Thank you.
Last question. Open-ended, what is one issue not being talked about in this race that should be aired or discussed? We'll start with Mr. Dahl.
Well, that's a good question. It seems like a lot of things have been talked about, and really important things like transportation, like education, like our business community and their ability to make a living and so forth. I'm surprised that we haven't talked about environmental issues as much, in this particular session. We certainly, there's a lot to talk about with water quality and air quality and climate change and long-term solutions. So, our environmental policies shouldn't just be border to border, but we have we need a worldwide discussion on that. So, I don't serve on any energy or environmental committees right now. I did serve on an energy committee my first 3 years in office, but it's pretty important to me, and I would hope that we can have good discussions going forward on what's the best source of energy for Minnesota, but also what are the best policies with good public input from regular citizens, with our farmers, with our business community. What's the best way going forward as coal plants shut down, as nuclear energy plants reach their end of their life? What kind of energy is going to be powering us for the next 50 to 100 years?
Mr. Bly?
I think the issue that I have not heard expressed or talked about at all today is housing, affordable housing for people. And I do hear from businesses that the shortage of affordable housing in many rural communities is a huge problem. And in order to bring in workers to the community, you need to have a place for them to live, or they have to travel great distances in order to take that job. And we have made some strides in the past couple of years of trying to help people find affordable housing. But more needs to be done, and some of it has to do with making sure that we subsidize or that we build housing that will be affordable for people. Also, increasing wages for people so they can afford housing is an important issue as well. So that's something I hope that we will continue to talk about and work on, not only for the citizens of Minnesota, but for small businesses too, so they can find the workers and have them in the communities that need to grow.
All right, Mr. Wells, what is one issue not being talked about in this race that should be discussed?
Well, I know today we've covered taxes every which way but left, but I'm going to go back into taxes and say fairness in taxing. The way that we tax people, and I kind of covered it a little bit before with my gas tax idea, where we need to really get rid of a variable license tab tax and make it more of a consumption tax. Likewise, I agree with property taxes. People that have retired and no longer have income are still paying the same in property taxes. I don't believe that's quite fair. I don't think that landowners, farmers that own thousands of acres of land, if there is a slight change in the value of their property and how it is taxed, how much that can actually affect them. I believe it needs to be more of a consumption based more off income rather than property, and gas tax, I believe it needs to be more off of gas and not license tab fees. Gas is a direct correlation with gas to the amount of how much our roads are being used and beaten up, and I really am in favor of more of an all-in on a gas tax rather than something else. So,
Ms. Watts?
I really think one of the issues is kind of far more general, and that would be civility in politics. Working in cooperation, talking about treating each other with respect. I think that goes a huge distance towards whether we have effective laws in place. My opponent at another forum, when we were all talking about sitting down, going through stuff, sitting down until you get it done, working together, he said more or less that in practice it doesn't really work that way. And I take that as an offense, that somebody that is representing the people of this area would say that there's really no place for that to really happen in reality. I reject that completely. In the private sector, we don't have the option to say that we just can't get along and we can't do it. When I go into a negotiation at my job, I'm not allowed to say, I don't like that person I'm negotiating with, so I'm just going to throw my hands up and walk away. That doesn't happen for us out there. It shouldn't happen in government either. The divisive kind of person that my opponent is, I think that time has come and gone and people are sick of it. They want a working, communicative government.
Okay, Mr. Draham?
Thank you. To me, one of the main issues I think that we've talked about, like a lot of things government likes to talk about but not act on, is mental health and just sheer number of beds for people that need help. And it encompasses all aspects of our state, all age groups, but we haven't really seen it tackled. We've seen committees, we've seen lip service, which we're used to, but no action. And I guess that's my frustration. Part of the reason I'm running is because I want to see something done, and how do you pay for all this stuff? I hear a lot of good ideas and some double speak from the experienced politicians. But the reason we don't have affordable housing is because everything costs too much. All the mandates that you put on new construction to build a house have cost, in the last 3 years, $33,000 in new mandates to the cost of a house. And we need to refocus our attention, get back to the basics. Roads and bridges, kids in the schoolroom, kids in general, and then public safety. And I throw mental health in there, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we've come up to our wrap-up closing remarks, and I'm going to make an executive decision and let Mr. Dahl, who has to teach class here in about 10 minutes. We don't want you speeding down the road and getting a traffic ticket. And we're going to give you 2 minutes for your closing remarks first.
Well, thank you. And as a driver's ed teacher, I will not be speeding down the road. But again, thank you for all coming, for all of you coming today. And I've enjoyed the discussion that we've had this morning and some really important issues. And I also want to thank, publicly my family, which They put up with a lot while all of us are out door knocking or attending forums and so forth. So I miss sitting down with my 3 kids and my wife and as they try to maintain the household here this 28 days to go. I'm sure we'll survive. But I want to reemphasize, I consider it an honor and a privilege and a tremendous responsibility that the people of Senate District 20 have given me to represent not only this district but Minnesota. I never take that for granted. I will continue to try to represent this district the best I can. I will continue to try to work across the aisle, which I believe that I've done. You can ask anyone at the Capitol. And I will continue to try to represent the best interests of the 2 sides of my district, which are so diverse. So I hope that we can move forward with some of the unfinished business. I was disappointed in how this particular session ended as well. I voted for a bonding bill. I voted for a tax bill. I voted for a transportation bill. And again, I'm disappointed that those are things that are left unfinished. We have a tremendous responsibility going forward to fix those particular issues, but also to create a budget for the next biennium. And so with your input, with your support, with working together with the House, Senate, and Governor, I'm looking forward to a next session if you'll give it to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bly, 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Well, thank you. And I, too, want to thank my family for their support in running for office, and to say that it is truly an honor to serve and be elected to represent this great district and a great state of Minnesota. I just want to, and just a quick aside, to thank candidate Draheim for mentioning mental health. I think that's an extremely important issue that we haven't brought forward, and we need to talk more about. However, we did do some things in mental health, particularly in funding mental health issues in schools and trying to bring back some of the needed care that should happen in schools. We can do much more, though, and there's a lot that's missing in that. My father lived to be only 43. He lived his whole life with severe diabetes. And he used his talents of being a newspaper reporter and photographer to be a good storyteller and tell good things. And he used his volunteer time to work with the disabled and to be a scout leader and try to inspire young people to do better. And my father believed, and he said to me that, everyone you meet has a gift and a talent that they want to give to society. And if you can help them find that and encourage them in that way, you've done a lot to better your society and your community. And that's something I've tried to do in my teaching. It's something I try to do in my legislating and representing the people of Northfield and District 20B. And I think it's something that we could all learn from. And I'm inspired by my father's efforts to make the most of his life, and that's something that I'm trying to do as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
You bet. Thank you guys for hosting this event. It was great to be here and see everyone that showed up this morning with the coffee. Thank goodness. It was very early. So, but what I would like to say is one of the reasons I'm running is because I like to help people. Before I decided to do this, I helped people with the fire department. I got on community boards and organizations around town, and whether I win or not, I'm going to continue to do that and help people in the community. Last night, before our fire meeting, there was a lady that ran out of gas at the intersection. I ran out and helped her, and I actually look forward to the first snow of the year so that I could drive around and pull people out of the ditches. I enjoy helping people, and that's why I'm doing this. I really do believe that my ideas are good, and my willingness to reach out to everyone in the legislature, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, to come to an agreement on what's best for everyone in Minnesota is really why I want to do this, and I look forward to everyone's support. And it's been a great summer. Everyone's been very supportive of our efforts, and not that anyone's counting, but 28 days, I'm looking forward to getting some of our time back. So our family normally takes a North Shore vacation. We're not rich by any means, so we always keep it in state, and I really missed that this summer. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Votz, 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
I ran back in 14 for this same seat, and I really didn't. I was very inexperienced in politics at that time, and I have spent the last 2 years really looking at our state, looking at our area, looking at the needs, and talking to people. And I came to many different ideas through doing that, and that is people want to be represented. They want to feel like somebody is on their side and is being their advocate. I have been an advocate virtually all my life, with dealing with health issues with my husband, with having 5 kids. You learn to take a hold of the reins and go with whatever you need to do for your family. And I'm prepared to do that for my area and for my state. There are so many things to be done, and I really feel like from talking to so many people that they're sick of the divisive nature of the representation we've had. They don't want us to go backwards. They want us to go forward. They want us to keep progressing. And like I say, they want an advocate. And I am willing to be that. I want to be their voice. I want to be sitting down with whoever is at the table to be for the betterment of my area and my state. We've seen a lot of good things happen in Minnesota. It's a great state to live in, but we want to make it more even, more equal for people, and where people feel like they have a chance to make it. So I want to be that person. I want to be that advocate, and I will sit down with whoever is at the table to make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Draham, 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Thank you, and thanks for putting this on, and thank you everyone for coming. But I forgot one very important statement. It's my daughter's birthday. Happy birthday, Lily. She's 12 today. And she's the reason I'm running. My daughter and my son's 8, David, and Lily's 12. And like a lot of people that I come across the district, we're really concerned on where we're headed as a state. And we have a great state. We want to keep it that way. And that's why we're passionate about, I think all of us are, up here at the table, passionate about what we're doing, even though we have different ideas on how to get there. And I guess I asked you to reflect on the experienced politicians that are up here and what have they done while they were up here in St. Paul or up in St. Paul. I have a whole list here of taxes that my opponent has voted for in the last couple of years, even though we had surpluses and extra money. Constant trying to create new revenue sources for the state. I have a different approach. I want to look at what we're spending money on. I want to get back, what does the average Minnesotan think is a priority in the state? And we need to focus on that. We need to do better in fewer areas. Education in the classroom, roads and bridges, and public safety, and I throw mental health in there. And yes, we will have to probably raise taxes to pay for mental health. I don't have a plan to pay for that. But transportation, I think we can get most of it paid for by what the Constitution says we should spend on roads and bridges. And I'm almost out of time. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank my opponent and everybody else in this table. And thank you.
I'd like to thank each of the candidates for attending today's State Legislative Candidate Forum, and thank you to our media sponsors, partners here, KYMN Radio and the Northfield News. Thank you for attending the forum. Have a great day, and remember to vote on Tuesday, November 8th, 2016. Thank you.